I'm here with Dr. Jyoti and Dr. Chiming to welcome our guest on Leaders in Accounting and Finance. And our guest this afternoon is Mr. Sahil Kamani. He is a graduate of Monash 2012, and he spent his first 4 years after graduating with RAM Ratings, which is Malaysia's largest credit rating agency. And over the next 2 years, he spent working with the government at the Securities Commission of Malaysia, assessing companies intending to undertake IPOs in Bursa Malaysia, the KL Stock Exchange. So that's 6 years out. Then our guest decides to move internationally, pick up a language and pursue an MBA in another language of all things. He decided to learn German, moved to Germany, studied his MBA at the Mannheim Business School, which is a great institution. Post-graduation, he worked for a year in a financial technology firm, which was essentially an online bank. Very interesting with what's going on today in Fintech. And recently, he has joined a German mining equipment manufacturer as its international subsidiary, financial controller, where he is the key finance person when it comes to international movements of money. So he'll just want to welcome you to the Leaders in Accounting and Finance. And we want to cover in this very short interview 3 areas. First, the finance working context that you're currently in. And in the middle bracket, we're going to look at the German working context, which we'll delve into why on earth someone would learn German of all languages. And then we'll go into our last section where we give more student advice. So I think there's a lot in here to pick out. And I just want to hand it over to Dr. Jyoti to start asking some questions, especially in the area of the finance specialization, which was your major at Monash University in 2012. Jyoti.
Thank you very much, Prof. Company. Good morning to you. Quite it's afternoon here. Well, I know you as a student, and you were a young boy at the time, and now you're a great man. Well, I will just start off briefly to ask you about your journey. How did you move to, of course, you have given us in your brief profile, but the days, how did you spend as analyst in the RAM rating agencies? And you see, there quite a lot you have done. To start, let's say that immediately after your graduation, as a young boy, just after the tertiary education, how did you cope into RAM rating for 4 years?
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for having me on, Dr. Jyoti, Dr. Chimeng, Professor Neil. I really appreciate to be here. It's nice to talk to you all again. And especially it's been 8 years since I left Monash. So it's nice to think back on the fond memories that I've had at this renowned institution. So back to your question, Dr. Jyoti. Yes. So joining RAM Ratings as a fresh graduate, it was challenging. It is a very challenging job. It's the institution for credit ratings in the country. So there's a very high standard that was set there. But I think what really helped me was the fact that in Monash, my lecturers, just like yourself, Dr. Jyoti, always encouraged me to take on internships during the summer holidays. So I managed to take 3 internships. So every summer holidays, I took 1 internship at a different institution. And this sort of gave me the corporate mindset to help me navigate through the complexities that you find yourself when faced in the workspace. So especially as a fresh graduate, you're trying to, first of all, make an impression. But this impression doesn't come easy because you lack those technical skills, those work skills. But I think what helped was having this exposure of doing internships. It really gives you that sort of edge that you need to get ahead in your workspace. So I could see that that was sort of the difference between me and my peers who had also started with me at the same institution. And this is how I could actually navigate through some of the issues at work as well.
Well, uh, particularly I'd like to know, or we would like to know, as you have majored a double major here, that banking and finance as well as economics.
Yep.
Focusing on banking and finance as what you have learned in the 3 years with us in Monash, how did it support your initial days in your RAM rating agency? Because you know you didn't have any experience and all that, of course, despite the skills of your internship. Once you are there, how much did it help you to build on yourself into the Securities Commission after that?
Sure. Yeah. So of course the degree of banking finance helped because it was a specialization into finance. And there were many modules I remember that really helped me. For example, I remember we had this module, I'm not sure if it's still there, but it's called Commercial Banking and Finance.
Yes.
And this is where we looked into we had this one assignment which looked into the credit scoring of a company. So we had to write an entire credit report. So I remember, I still remember this because it was asked during my interview 8 years ago even. And I had written actually a report for my Monash assignment on SP Satya. At that point in time, they used to do well. Now I think it's okay. So I remember I wrote this entire report. I had ratios there. I had all of the financial information, the corporate history. And when I went for the interview, they actually asked me. They said, "Okay, do you have you done anything like this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember. I wrote a credit report on SP Satya." So the first question they asked me was, "Okay, tell us the revenue for SP Satya in like 2011." Right? So and I gave that answer, and they were, I mean, it was a panel of about 8 people at that time. It was a top executive management of RAM Ratings, and they loved it. They were like, wow, okay, this is exactly what we're doing. We need you to know numbers by hand, because you will be meeting different clients. And you'll be comparing different companies. So you need to have these numbers at the back of your mind. So they really like that, right? So I think that unit really saved my life and gave me this opportunity to have this. And not disregarding the economics module, because while my interest was also in finance, I also have this deep interest in economy, in government, in policy. So the economics part really helped. So it really gave me like a macro outlook of what the world is looking like, what industries are looking like, right? And this helps in my position as an analyst, because as an analyst, you need to understand different industries, the dynamics, the interactions, and then how you can actually rate a particular company, right? So this was at RAM Ratings, and moving forward to when I joined the Securities Commission, because this was more of my passion to work for the government, and to add that sort of flair into my profile, because many people just stick to private sector, but I wanted a public sector look on my profile as well. So hence I joined the Securities Commission, and over here again the banking finance major helped, but also at the same time the economics part helped, because then you're not just able to talk about specific companies and industries, but then you can also talk about the overall economy and link it back. And if I can go back just to my interview again at RAM, I still remember this like it was yesterday. I remember that I was waiting in the interview lobby, and I picked up the newspaper, and that newspaper, there was this headlines about the steel industry crashing because China was dumping steel at that time, right? So I took the same analogy and I connected it to SP Satya's construction part, and there was a question about the costs. What is the risk of SP Satya, right? And this is something I had just read in the interview lobby on the newspaper. So then it made me connect these pieces together, and they loved it. And this is what it's about. It's about putting things together. It's about making sense. It's about having a story, right? And this is what helped me. The banking finance module and the economics module together was actually a really beautiful marriage in the end for me.
Well, wonderful. This is where I see why you are at where you are now. Well, Dr. Chimeng, I think you can ask some things there about your fintech.
Yeah, sure. Having worked for a fintech company, I believe it's in Germany, can you maybe please provide us on the fintech landscape in Germany or maybe European Union as compared to Asia? Yeah.
So basically, the top three fintech hubs in Europe. So number one is London, number two is Berlin, and number three is Tallinn in Estonia. So these are the three main fintech hubs. London is of course huge for obvious reasons, being a financial center. But the hope, at least for us on the continent, is that we are able to navigate some of that business away from London into Berlin and Tallinn. So the fintech industry, it's quite unique over in Europe, because in Europe we have something known as GDPR, where they're very strict about their data privacy laws on the continent, and especially given the history over here. And so this makes it a bit difficult at times to navigate through. And also there's quite an aversion to change in Europe on the continent, especially given the higher ages over here. Whereas in Asia, you have a large portion of young people. Yes, so in Malaysia, you've got like a third of our population that's below the ages of 35, right? So the acceptance to change is there. So in fact, when I moved from Malaysia to Germany, I realized that Malaysia is so much far in advance in terms of like electronic payments, right? Like in Malaysia, you can use your card and go anywhere. Now you have Grab Pay since the last couple of years. I mean, in Germany, this is completely unheard of. Like over here, cash is king.
Wow.
Okay,
so
right.
You would actually see people at supermarkets counting pennies on the dollar and you know, giving it to the cashier.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be classified as rather primitive for you know, people like us who are coming from Southeast Asia, and we have all of these advanced technologies. So that's quite interesting. But over here, since COVID hit, actually credit payments have increased by 50% in just 10 days alone when COVID hit initially in March. So you can actually see that people here are, I mean, they've been forced rather to get onto the technology bandwagon.
Technology now.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because of this, I mean, the first fintech wave that that we can see over here is the payments part. Because of this, so the payments part is ongoing. And what you see here, that's perhaps a bit different than Asia, is over here, given that there is the presumption that there's stronger regulation, that this could sort of be the benchmark of how things should be. But that said, you know, Europe or Germany as well, it's not spared from it. Recently, we had this huge scandal with Wirecard, which was the largest fintech company in Europe just a few months ago, and there was this massive fraud, and the entire company's come down, and this was due to lax regulation. So I mean, there was a big interest in Europe to build up a fintech company that could compete with the likes of the big boys in the US. However, this came crashing down. So it's quite interesting when you compare the differences, where there's one part is of course the technology, and then the other part is the regulation, because I mean, banking is such a regulated sector. So you need to sort of find a sweet spot between innovation and regulation, and I think that's what everyone is trying to figure out, not just in Europe, but in Asia, in the US.
Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Sahil. Now, you see, counting back in your experience, what you gained from RAM plus the Securities Commission, you have been up in the ladder towards international exposure. And that's why we are quite interested to ask you humbly, when did you actually decide that Germany is the only place where your future is going to lie on?
That's a really interesting question.
Did you choose the language first or the country first? You know, which was,
interestingly, neither. I always wanted to do an MBA. I think there was something that was quite close to my heart. I always, because especially when I was at RAM as an analyst, literally everyone, I mean 95% of people around me were doing a CFA, or some
Yeah.
other sort of professional certification. Could
That's
be
right.
even a the financial risk management as well. I mean, the FRM, that's the one. So you see people doing these things, and I was just wondering, like, I mean, for me personally, it was just too much of a time investment for me. I was spending 12 to 14 hours at work on average, sometimes more, and then coming back home and studying. It was just not for me. As I pointed out before, I have a deep interest in politics and governments and economy, so I spend my evenings reading about things that's not connected to work. Maybe broadly, of course, but not specifically connected to work, and I enjoy it, and it gives me immense pleasure to sort of read this and then perhaps have these sort of discussions with like-minded friends or such. So this is sort of my passion, right? So I did not see myself coming back home and after hard days of labor and then studying. I completely admire my friends who have done it, and some of them are brilliant guys who have actually got and done the CFA in minimum record time. But it just wasn't a fit for me. So I knew that I was more of a people's person. I needed to communicate. I guess one of my strengths is communication, and this is what I wanted to leverage on. And I knew that doing an international MBA that's away from home would be a huge jump in my career, and I wanted to also, on top of that, at that point in time I was 26, 27, and I thought that, okay, at this age, I think it's about time I take a risk. I've been brought up I've been born in Malaysia, been brought up in Malaysia, studied in Malaysia, never left more than 3 months. That was when I did an internship in India, but that's it. Never left home for longer than that. So I wanted to sort of test myself, and I felt that this is the right age for me to do so. And then when looking at MBAs, I thought, okay, if I do an MBA abroad, I am spending a lot of money. It's not cheap. It's not a cheap program. There are not many scholarships out there. So if I do this, I also want a ROI. Again, thinking as an analyst, right?
Yes.
So what's the ROI on my MBA, right? And I was looking around for perhaps favorable visa regimes, and I mean, the world at 3 years ago has already started looking inward. So there were a lot of restrictions, and then I thought, okay, I want to go to a place where there are not many Malaysians there. So I have that X factor. So they would be a Malaysian and be like, wow, okay, he's a Malaysian, let's talk to him. And on top of that, I also wanted to pick up a language. That was sort of a personal goal of mine. And in Germany just sort of fell in my lap. It has a favorable visa regime that allows you to work. And the only impediment is the language. So I thought, okay, language is something I can learn. I was fairly confident. I'm still learning, unfortunately. I'm not that great yet. But I think I've come, I guess I've come a long way since then.
We're talking about 2017, 2018 now. You decide to go to Germany. Obviously, the MBA is in German, correct?
No.
Is it entirely German language?
No, it's an international MBA, so it's in English.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right,
but
right.
Did you start learning German before you went to Germany?
Yes. So I made a decision in December 2017 that I will be going to Germany. January 2018, I started learning German for about 7 months. I used to go for evening classes twice a week.
Wow.
And it's just basically survival German. So.
Wow. And that was in Malaysia.
Order a beer. It's order a beer in the restaurant, things like that.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
And the MBA, how long did the MBA take?
The MBA was 12 months. So European MBAs are typically 12 months. Right.
We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about student advice. Sure. But I guess there's a question here. I guess there's one that Chiming wants to ask about Industry 4.0. But before that, how is it like working with Germans? The challenges, advantages, the culture, the ethics.
The culture, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very different compared to working with Malaysians. That's for sure. I mean, in Malaysia, and many of you may know, we like our coffee breaks. We like to take sort of long coffee breaks to just sort of discuss things. We have the sort of, work is family, right? For us, we have this very informal attitude to our colleagues, and, we're always sort of intrusive into everyone's lives and seeing what's going on. And this is just very part of the Malaysian culture. We're very giving people, very sharing. We like to share, we bring food for each other. So bringing these cultural characteristics and then moving to Germany, there was a bit of a shock for me. Yeah? So over here, people do respect their individual time. There's a big emphasis on work-life balance. So people do their 8-9 hours and then they would go home. And then, usually you never see people staying back late. So it is quite interesting. And in terms of even language, yeah. So I mean, of course, we are so used to speaking English all the time, but of course they would like to speak in their mother tongue, and that's where they feel they can express themselves more clearly, and that's completely fair. And even in terms of work ethic, they are very focused and committed to their work in those 8 hours. Yeah, so in those 8 hours, they're workhorses, and then they respect their family time, their individual time. So there's no, in Malaysia, post work on Friday, it's drinks at the local pub. Whereas in Germany, that's unfortunately not the case.
That's interesting because per capita, Germans are large beer consumers. So your current manufacturer that you work for, did you find that there would be groups of people or groups of workers would speak with one another in German, but when it came to a full meeting, then it was in English? Or how was the language tackled inside the organization?
Yeah, so I mean, everything we do over here is in German. So official announcements. We just had a town hall recently that was also purely in German. I mean, of course, I mean, even though it's an international company, we have about 6-7 subsidiaries all around the world, and we're looking to open up even more in the future. It's still very German. It's a very traditional German company. I mean, they've been around for over 100 years. Many different sort of stakeholders in the past. The last big stakeholder was the former socialist German government, and then it's been privatized in the last 30 years, right, since the Berlin Wall fell down.
Okay.
So it is still very German. The meetings are in German, but of course, sometimes when there's 1 or 2 English speakers in the room, they would switch to English, but that's again dependent on the person, right? So if the person is comfortable to express themselves in English, they would. If not, they would just continue in German.
I think Chiming might have something to ask. Now, we're still talking about German and Industry 4.0. Chiming, you want to say something on it?
Yeah. So we know that the Industrial 4.0 was conceived in Germany, and now you're actually working for a German mining equipment manufacturers. So the question I have, or can you please maybe provide us with some insight on how the Industrial 4.0 is impacting the manufacturers, maybe like your employers? Yeah.
Sure. No, definitely. That's a great question, and very relevant. So in terms for us, I think internally we're actually trying to digitalize a lot of our processes. I mean, the Industry 4.0 is all about using data technology and getting your entire processes a lot more efficient. So yes, we are doing that. We are rolling out like a ERP system across the entire global reach that we have. We haven't had that before. We're using data a lot more in terms of our equipment manufacturing as well. And there's been a big emphasis on this. So we've had a new management in the last 2 years because the company is undergoing restructuring. And this is one of the key focus areas as well. So digitalization is definitely on top of everyone's minds.
Wow.
Wow. Right. In your current role as the financial controller, is there any impact on the accounting and finance function? Do you use RPA, robotic process automation, the sort of software or tools, or how is it impacting the management accounting practice? Maybe the approach taken to cost a product could be different from what we have learned, what was being practiced in the past. Because they might be using augmented reality or VR to design cars or design machines, things like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, in terms of the finance side of things, just like every good German company, we use SAP as our ERP system. So supporting local over here as well. And it's of course one of the best ERP systems in the world. So we have been on SAP, and SAP is now transitioning into SAP for HANA. So many of the old SAP systems now moving out to for HANA, and I think we're going to do that as well in the next year or two. So that's one part of it. And then in terms of using technology to do designs and such, I do believe that we have a R&D department in the company, and they are tied closely to the local university that we have here, Otto von Goethe, who are then also tied with there's an institute here that does research and design in mechanical engineering. So they're tied to those, the Max Planck Institute, that's the one, Max Planck Institute. So we have one here, and they're tied with them as well. And so all of them are doing R&D, and there's a lot of knowledge sharing across the board. We actually have people pursuing their PhDs and such coming on board to the company and doing like a practical sort of 1-year program here. So how it works in Germany is there's a big focus on apprenticeship, and this is very unique to the German working way, where at the ages of 17, 18, one doesn't need to finish a degree or such. You can just come in and work with the company, have like a 3-4 year contract, and while working in the company, you can actually build up and have your experience counts as a degree or such. So, and this is very highly looked upon in Germany, and this is not just to manufacturing, but also even accounting, right? So you can go in and work for an accounting firm at the age of 17, 18, fresh out of school.
Wow.
And you just have to sign a 3-year contract or so, and then you start specializing in that. So yeah, this is one unique way of working in Germany, actually.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing again.
Okay.
Yep, no worries.
Sahil, very nice the way you have moved upon, and your not only your aim but the courage you have taken to move into a place of where you are now. I would like to know, or we as a team would like to know, what advice would you give to the current students in Monash who are who have followed your footsteps now in the 3 years BBSCOM? Just as a final year student, what advice will you tell them? Like, for example, you didn't want to do CFA, and you didn't want to do any other professional programs and all that because of your work commitment, but yet you had an aim. You had an aim to move somewhere far like this and have an international MBA where international organizations can recognize you, and you are doing great. What advice would you tell them?
The road not taken, right? Because I was just watching some of your previous interviews, and they were with some of my ex-classmates, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, these guys have done the professional qualifications. So I would say to the final year and students at Monash, don't worry, things will be great. I mean, things always look bleak, especially when you're a student and you're sort of a youngling sitting there wondering what's going to happen to me. Maybe perhaps people around you are getting jobs, you're not, but eventually the job will come to you, because Monash is a big name, a huge name in Malaysia particularly, and employers do take a step back when they see that on your CV. So I think that's one thing that you have going for you. Secondly, if you're in your final year and you have the opportunity, I would definitely recommend to do an internship. I understand it's not part of the Monash program, but I think, professors like Dr. Jyoti always encourage us to take it. And I took his advice a bit too keenly, because it ended up being 3 internships in 3
Wow.
years. But yeah, I would rightfully recommend to do an internship so you have some practical experience. And in the interviews that you have for your full-time job, you can talk about this experience. And employees are always excited to know what you did before in your previous
right.
job, your previous roles. So I think that's one thing, getting this practical experience. Secondly, I think it's also taking advantage of what Monash has to offer. So we have like a wonderful student council. So I was part of the student council. I was the business school representative. Ran for an election there as well. So I would definitely recommend students to take part in all the clubs and activities that we have in Monash. Again, when you have things on your CV, it just gives you a story to talk about, right? So think about. I always love interviews because I get to talk about myself, and that's quite rare. No one really wants to listen about what you have to say these days, but interviews are a great way that you can talk about yourself. And the only way you can talk about yourself is if you have a story. And the only way you have a story is if you pick up these pieces along the way and these opportunities that an institution like Monash throws at you. And then when you do that, you can talk about it. Even a simple thing like being in a drama show, right? I think we still have every year we have this big, huge drama performance by the drama club. You could just go there and be a part of it, be a part of the show, help out, and that can go on your CV. You can talk about it. It's end of the day, it's just about having a story and having an interesting story that the end of the day, the employer just needs to like you, because as a fresh graduate, they're not gonna hire you based on your skill set, because they know that you're a fresh graduate. Come on, what can I expect of you, right? I'll have to teach you, but in order for me to teach you, I need to like you. And how am I supposed to like you if you're not an interesting person? So be interesting.
Yes, I like that.
Well, Sahil, I don't know whether you can tell this. What is your next aim? Do you have anything like a PhD in your mind, or where are you going to move next? Academically or
No.
experience-wise? You have got enormous experience by now.
Yeah, so I think no, I wouldn't do a PhD. I think all the 3 of you have done it, and it's a harrowing experience. My partner's done a PhD, and the last 5 years with her has been it's been pretty tough. But thank goodness she's done it. Yeah, so I think in terms of the future, I've been actually thinking, because I've mentioned this in my interview a couple of times right now, that I'm very interested in government public policy part. So maybe perhaps in the next 10 years, I would do a master's in public policy. And then I would like, of course, as all Malaysians abroad, I would like to come back home at some point in the future and give back to the country and join the government service again in any means and capacity. So that's sort of the long-term goal.
I guess stepping back from the PhD, which is the future, but you did do an MBA, and I guess we had a question about, well, how did the MBA enhance your corporate finance knowledge, or how did it weave into the steps that you have taken in your career?
I think that's the best question, because the MBA, what it does, first of all, to in terms of how it helps you, is you are interacting with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different languages. So this really internationalizes your profile as a person, because at any given point in time, for any subjects that we had, we were put into small groups of 5 or 6 people. At the end of the day, it's not what you produce that's your biggest learning, but your biggest learning is working with different people. And I thought, I was like, yeah, what's the difference of working with, when you put a German, an American, an Australian, and a Malaysian, and an Indian, and a Chinese in the room, right? Like, what's the big deal? Oh, I was I was proven wrong in that. And end of the day, it's about how you navigate through this, and how as a team you reach your goal, because your goal is actually easy to reach. If you do it yourself, you can do it. But how do you as a team sort of navigate through that? So I think that was my biggest learning. And secondly was a network. Of course, your ability to network, and of course the network that the business school offers you. So I think those were 2 good things. in terms of corporate finance knowledge, because the MBAs are typically built for people from various backgrounds, not just finance. So you have engineers. We had a neuroscientist in there. We had a doctor. We had people from the automotive space, of course, being in Germany. IT people as well, and then you have the normal finance people. So corporate finance was not a very specialized aspect of the MBA, but as I mentioned, you do bits and pieces of everything, and then you get these sort of managerial skills along the way, and this sort of helps you navigate through the uncertainties and complexities of work. And I can really see that right now in my career with this current German mining manufacturer. And working with people from a different culture than me, I can really sort of leverage on that and address many of the issues that I have at work in terms of even basic things like communication, because there can be miscommunication between people of two different cultures, two different sort of working styles as well. But how do you sort of reach a middle ground, right, and not ruffle the feathers too much? And still, at the end of the day, people need to like you, right? You need to be a likable person.
What's coming out of your story, Sahil, is, and I like how your advice to students is people want to hear your story, especially in an interview, because they want to know if they can work with you. And working with you is, well, they need to feel that they might like you and they like interesting people to work with. And it's not so much about your technical grades on your CV, but how you come across as an interesting person. In order to be interesting, you need to have some stories. In order to have some stories, you need to take action and get involved and do things. So I like how you're connecting the dots here. And one thing I'd like to add, something you haven't addressed, but connecting the dots, like less than 8 years ago, you were finishing at Monash. And now in those 8 years, you have worked for 4 different employers. So it's not like that's on average 2 years per job. Some students feel that, oh, when we get a job, we're going to be in there for the next 10 years. And I think, would you like to comment on that, about how that has benefited you when you're moving from employer to employer to employer?
Sure. No, so actually, I've read this article a couple of months ago where it said that my parents' generation would have had maybe 2 or 3 jobs in their entire lifespan.
Yes.
My generation would have about 6 to 8 jobs throughout our lifespan, and our children will have about 15 to 20 jobs in their lifespan, right? So I think technology is moving so fast, and at the end of the day, it's all about your ability to adapt to different situations. And I think that's what's helped me the most, because initially I was in a private sector. So, the mindset was very profit driven, very client customer oriented. And then you go into public policy. So it's then, you become, you got to take care of the stakeholders, the general public at large, the small auntie and uncles who are the investors, because, you want to make sure that their money is safe. So that was one part of it. And then I moved into the fintech space, which was just like, super growth, everyone, let's do this. Like, we need to get rid of this old banks that are around us. So it was like super driven, motivated culture. And now I've moved into a very traditional, German company where the culture is quite conservative, and, you have to be careful you don't step on too many toes. There could be a bit of a bureaucratic process as well. So, these different industries, what it's taught me is that you really need to have an ability to adapt, and you will make mistakes along the way, definitely, but it's completely fine. People judge you not from your mistakes, but your ability to learn from them. So, just make sure you don't do it twice, and you're fine. And in terms of being in a job for life, I think this mentality needs to go, definitely, especially with the new generation. I mean, you're gonna keep changing jobs every 2 years or so, and it's natural. I mean, even for me, when I was back in Malaysia, I can see my peers changing jobs just because for salary reasons. So when I joined RAM Ratings, my batch had 10 people, and I stayed down for 4 years. In the first 2 years itself, 8 left, 7 to 8 left. Yeah. Wow. so even back then, people still were changing jobs, and I mean, they left the job for various reasons. One was, misfit, or most of was just, more salary. You get 1,000 ringgit more somewhere, you move. But for me, I wanted to really establish myself and have a foundation.
Yes.
My technical skills, because I was not doing any professional qualification. So that's why RAM was a good place for me, and the 4 years was great. It was a great time, and I learned a lot. And you have to understand, when people leave, that opens up opportunity for you as well. Yeah. So there's a void that needs to be filled, and you can always step up and take it. So I think, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just finishing up in terms of your current position. What's the biggest challenge in your current role? Like maybe this year with COVID, how has that shaped your role as you are a financial controller? You were a financial controller in 2019, and now 2020, you're still a financial controller. Has your role changed? How has COVID affected the order of things in terms of what you need to get done as a financial controller?
Sure. Yeah. COVID has definitely affected it, and because my position is the international subsidiary financial controller, so I need to look at all of the international subsidiaries that our company has, and it's quite important for me to also be there physically at all of our different locations, and of course COVID's not allowed me to do so, and I just took up this job about 3 months ago, so ideally I should have been traveling and checking out our different facilities, and you need to be there physically as well to see what's going on, because when people tell you something on the phone, it's hard to put your fingers onto it. So I think this has been the most difficult part, and then it's again, as I mentioned before, adapting, right? Then how do you communicate better with people? So for example, I had a virtual workshop about a month ago with all of my international colleagues, and this has never been done before in the company. Like they don't do stuff virtually; they're just not used to it.
Wow.
They're very traditional.
On Zoom, right?
We use Teams, Microsoft Teams.
Oh, okay. No problem with that.
Same thing. So I conducted a virtual workshop, and I mean, this is something that's never sort of been done before, and then we start setting a normal, right? Then it starts becoming okay to have these discussions through virtual workshops.
Right.
And yeah, so this is the biggest thing. But as I said, as long as you're able to adapt, you're fine.
And you have regular meetings with your subsidiaries. Would you feel as though you have more frequent conversations now you're in the online communication space, rather than, because now you cannot physically travel. So how do you close that void of making sure that you really, really understand the financial economics of the various subsidiaries?
So I think at the end of the day, then you just have to take in a bit of more of an effort to really, garner the trust of your colleagues who sit internationally. And this takes time, right? So you have to continuously talk to them. You have to assure them, reassure them even that everything's going to be okay. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to look at you as this big boss sitting on top, giving instructions. But so it's about trying to communicate properly. And for me, that's the key. As long as communication is there, transparency is there, they see that you're making an effort on your side to understand them, then it's okay. And also because, we have different subsidiaries all around the world, sitting in different countries, then the cultural aspect comes in as well, right? So if I'm talking to my colleagues in Chile, we spend the first 5 minutes doing, just talking about, the weather and how things are in Santiago, and things like that. So how family is, how old their kids are, where else, when you work with when you're working in Germany, for example, then you've got to sort of 30 seconds for that, and then get straight to the point. So it's about like looking at the different cultures and seeing that how you can adapt to that. And I think it's really helpful because yeah, coming from Malaysia, we are a cultural melting pot. So we've grown up sort of understanding that how do you going for different festivities at different people's houses. You have this understanding already, and it's just sort of enhanced when you leave home. So yeah.
That's amazing. Sorry, Jyoti, would you like to?
No, I just want to tell Sahil, such an amazing thing to know what's been going on around him and so much of things he have learned, and this is what we expect truly out of our students. I'm really proud of you, Sahil.
Thank you, Dr. Jyoti. It's great. It's great catching up with you as well. I mean, it's so many years.
I would say that in some ways, Sahil, you have made the Monash brand proud.
No, that's really kind of you to say, Professor.
And in some ways, that's what we want from our students, to feel that they make the Monash brand even bigger, beyond what us teachers being in Monash can do. So, and that's what you've done. Like, summarize what you've done. You've left Monash, you've worked in private, worked in government, then say, okay, let's pick a country. Okay, Germany, let's do that. All right, let's go to Germany. Oh, I better learn some German while I'm at it. Oh, there's an MBA there. Let's do an MBA. Oh, let's get a job in Germany. And now suddenly you're a financial controller of an international subsidiary. All of that in less than 8 years from graduating from Monash, which is truly amazing. This is something that you could describe that someone has done over 2 or 3 decades, but you have done all this in 8 years. So I think you are an inspiration. You're an inspiration for your generation. And we would say, class, our current lot of students in the same generation as you, it's not like you're in an older generation, like 8 years out, you're still with that same mindset. And really appreciate the words of wisdom that you had to say, because it's important that our students, especially finance majors, get to hear from real graduates who have also done a finance major like yourself. So any last comments or advice for our major students?
Sure. Thank you for those really kind words, Professor. Really appreciate them. And you're always happy to come back to the Monash fold and talk more. I think any last parting words for students is what I mentioned before. Just have fun, enjoy the 3 years. It's great. I mean, Monash really has a lot to offer. So I would say, look at opportunities, grab them, do things that you like, read, do look out for opportunities, do internships. I mean, there's so many things you can do with these 3 years. You have, no financial responsibilities. There's no loans, nothing. You have 3 years. You have great lecturers. You have great tutors. Talk to them. I still remember I used to go to Dr. Jyoti's room, and we used to have these conversations about the economy and such. And it was lovely. I mean, those are sessions where I really learned things from himself. From my other lecturers as well. I would say really make use of every opportunity you get these 3 years. They're your prime years. You can do anything. You're free to do whatever you like. So yeah, grab them and go for it, I would say. And don't worry about the future. Future always looks uncertain.
I like that last comment. The future, well, by actually definition, the future is uncertain, right? So
exactly.
In some ways, you create your own future by stepping out of the box and taking risk, which is what you have done. Thanks so much again, Sahil. And thanks Dr. Chiming and Jyoti for driving these interviews, and Dr. Jyoti being a great teacher for Sahil, our guest today. And thank you for being on our 6th series of Leaders in Accounting and Finance interview series. Thank you again, Sahil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sahil.
All the best. All the best to you. Thank you.